My dad gave me a choice: support the family or disappear forever. I chose to disappear. I thought that would be the end of it. I had no idea it was just the beginning of everything. Support your family or stay gone. That was the message my father sent. No explanation, no empathy. Just a cold, emotionless ultimatum. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering, reading those 7 words over and over until they blurred. And finally, I typed back. Then I'm out. I press send. Then silence. I tossed my phone onto the couch and sat back, the quiet in my 1-bedroom apartment suddenly suffocating. It was the kind of silence that felt foreign, like the world was holding its breath. For years, I had been my father's lifeline, though he never deserved one. His endless gambling, shady business ventures, maxed out credit cards. I'd picked up every piece. Over and over again. Not because I owed him, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd finally change. He never did. This time, when he called, his voice was laced with that familiar mix of arrogance and irritation. And when I said no, he laughed. Not in disbelief, but as if I had told him the most ridiculous joke imaginable. Then his voice turned cold. "You've got 2 choices, Lucas. Either support your family or walk away for good." I didn't hesitate. Then I'm out. I expected guilt to slam into me like a tidal wave. But instead, I felt empty and strangely free. For the first time in my life, the weight was lifting. The chains were breaking. I didn't know what came next, but I knew this much. I had finally chosen myself. The call that changed everything. 3 days passed. The quiet was unsettling. I tried to return to routine. Burnt coffee, silence, the dull ache of being cut off from your own blood. I was mid-pour, watching cheap coffee drip into my chipped mug when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something, intuition, maybe, nudged me to answer. "Is this Lucas Everett?" The voice was calm, professional, not one of the usual collectors hounding my father. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Brett Phillips. I'm an attorney handling the estate of Mr. Francis Everett. Do you have a moment to speak about your uncle's will?" My grip loosened. The mug nearly crashed to the floor. Uncle Francis? The name felt like dust in my memory, barely there. My dad's side of the family was a chaotic blur of estranged siblings and forgotten cousins. But Francis, yes, I remembered. Quiet, reclusive, a ghost at family gatherings, usually lingering in a corner with a drink and a vacant stare. My father used to mock him ruthlessly. And nobody, he called him. A failure who never made a single smart decision in his life. I hadn't seen him in more than 10 years. "Yes," I answered, cautious. Phillips continued. "Mr. Everett passed away 2 weeks ago. You are his sole heir." I blinked, confused. "So did you? Wait, you're saying he left me something?" "Not just something," he replied. "He left you everything." The room tilted. I dropped into my chair, heart racing. Everything? There had to be a mistake. Why would a man I barely knew leave me his entire estate? "Okay," I said slowly, still reeling. "When do you need me to come in?" "As soon as possible. There are urgent matters regarding your inheritance that need immediate attention." "Urgent matters." Those 2 words rang in my ears like a warning, or maybe a promise. I didn't know what this meant, or why it was happening now. But I did know one thing. For once in my life, something was finally shifting in my favor. And I wasn't about to waste it. The inheritance revealed the drive to the law office was a blur of traffic lights and fractured thoughts. I tried to recall anything about Uncle Francis that might explain why he'd leave me everything. But all I had were shadows. Growing up, my father never missed a chance to trash him. "Francis is a joke," he'd sneer. "Can't hold a job. Can't even keep a roof over his head. Total disgrace to the family." That's all I ever knew. To me, Uncle Francis was a blurry figure at family gatherings, quiet, distant, always lingering in the corners while my dad loudly bragged about another half-baked business plan. My mom would shower my sister with compliments while I stood off to the side, invisible. And Francis? He'd just sip his drink, nod politely, and say nothing. Then one day, he disappeared. No oublié, no explanation, and no one seemed to care. Now, 10 years later, I was walking into a law office to inherit everything from the man everyone else had erased. I half expected to step into a dusty old firm with faded carpets and a stressed-out lawyer in a suit 2 sizes too big. But no, this place was sleek, modern. Glass walls, black leather chairs, polished marble floors. The kind of place meant to intimidate you the second you walk in. "Mr. Everett?" I turned to find a sharply dressed man holding a pristine folder. "Brett Phillips," he said, extending a firm handshake. "Right this way." He led me down a hallway that felt more like a tech CEO's office than anything tied to my family. We entered a minimalist meeting room, clean, expensive, quiet. "You probably have a lot of questions," he said, flipping open the folder. I nodded. "Your uncle, Francis Everett, was a deeply private man. But before his passing, he made sure everything was in order. You're his sole heir. That includes financial holdings, real estate, and several business ventures. I blinked. Business ventures? I asked cautiously. How much are we talking about? He slid a document toward me. I picked it up, and my stomach dropped. 7 figures. I read the number again, slower this time, trying to make sure my eyes weren't lying to me. This doesn't make sense, I whispered. My father always said he was broke. Phillips gave a slight nod, his expression unreadable. Your father was misinformed. Francis Everett was no fool. He was strategic, disciplined. He invested quietly, ran multiple enterprises under the radar. He lived modestly, so modestly, in fact, that most assumed he had nothing. I gripped the paper tighter, my heart pounding. All these years, my dad had been chasing money like a madman, failing, borrowing, then leaning on me to bail him out. And the whole time, the real fortune in the family had belonged to the man he'd spent a lifetime mocking. The irony was almost poetic. So, I said slowly, what happens now? Phillips leaned in slightly. Now, you decide what to do with what's been given to you. But something tells me you already have a plan. He was right. Oh, he was absolutely right. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's lifeline. I was in control, and I knew exactly where to start. The power shift, I walked out of that law office with a folder clutched tightly in my hands, but it felt heavier than just paper. It was power, legally bound, irrevocable, real. My mind spun, flooded with thoughts I never imagined I'd be allowed to entertain. 7 figures. The number echoed in my head like a siren, flashing behind my eyes, louder than the traffic, louder than my own disbelief. Just hours ago, I was scraping together coins for rent. Now, I was wealthy. But this wasn't just a financial windfall. This was liberation. For years, I had been my father's fallback plan. The human cushion for every bad bet, every failed hustle, every drunken misstep. When he gambled our stability away, I paid the price. When he ran his credit into the ground, I dug him out. And every time, he looked at me not with gratitude, but expectation. Like I owed him. Like my existence came with a price tag labeled obligation. But now the script had flipped. When I got home, I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I sat at my laptop, opened a browser, and began my own kind of audit. Finding my father's debts wasn't hard. His financial failures were practically broadcast to the world. Loans from banks, overdue credit cards, sketchy lenders, a dozen unpaid tabs, each one worse than the last. But one stood out. A large debt, substantial, owed to a private individual, some quiet local figure known for lending cash under informal, untraceable terms. High interest, no merci. From what I could gather, my father was barely treading water, paying off the interest just to avoid sinking completely. I leaned back in my chair, a grin slowly curling across my face. With what I now had, I could buy that debt. All of it. And once I did, I wouldn't need to ask, beg, or reason. I could demand repayment in full. Exactly like he had done to me. Every single time. But I wasn't stopping there. I dug deeper. That's when I found it. The house. The home my parents had lived in for over 20 years. The one they paraded at holidays like some permanent symbol of stability. It was hanging by a thread. One more missed payment, and the bank would repossess it. I made one phone call. 24 hours later, I had acquired their loan. By the end of the week, I had legal control over the entire foreclosure process. And then I waited, not out of hesitation, not out of doubt. I waited because I wanted him to feel it. To feel that slow, creeping fear that comes when the wolves are finally at the door, and no one's left to call for help. This wasn't revenge. This was balance being restored. The reckoning begins 3 days later. My phone rang. I didn't need to look at the screen. I already knew. The silence had gone on too long. I answered. Lucas, we need to talk. My father's voice wasn't its usual bark. It was tight, strained, like someone forcing themselves not to panic. About what? I asked casually, letting the silence stretch. Don't play dumb, he snapped. I got a notice. My debts, they've been handed off to a new collector. This guy's demanding full repayment. That wouldn't be you. Would it? I smiled. Slow. Cold. It is. Silence. For the first time in my life, my father didn't have a comeback. No shouting. No blame. Just silence. You told me to stay out of your business, I said, my voice calm and unwavering. I'm just doing what you asked. Pay up, Dad. You've got 1 week. Lucas, just lease. I ended the call. This was just the beginning. 2 more days passed. Nothing from him. But I could picture it. Him pacing in that rundown living room, chewing his nails, rereading that letter over and over. He was used to the kind of desperation where I was the solution. Not anymore. But I wasn't finished. I already controlled his debts. Now, it was time to take the roof over his head. The house, their pride and joy, was hanging by a thread. I had the paperwork. I had the legal standing. All it took was a final notice. One last push. I drafted it, signed it, sent it. Deadline, 72 hours. Full payment, or the home was no longer theirs. I knew he didn't have it. He never did. He spent his life chasing quick wins, betting on impossible odds, and leaving me to clean up the mess when it all came crashing down. This time, no one was coming to save him. But the next call, it wasn't from him. It was my mother. The moment I picked up, her voice cracked. "Lucas, I'm begging you. Please. Whatever this is, stop." I nearly laughed. The nerve. Stop? Did they ever pause when I was drowning? What? I asked. Now it matters? Her voice shook. "This is our home. You're tearing this family apart." I let the silence linger, cold and deliberate. "And how many times," I said, "did you tell me it wasn't your concern when he dragged us into debt? When he emptied my savings? When he lied, gambled, and left me to pick up the pieces?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. "You stood by," I continued, "year after year. And now it suddenly matters because the fallout finally landed on you." Her sobs on the other end didn't move me. I had no tears left to give. "You have 72 hours to vacate," I said, my tone flat. "Final. Think of it as my last act of staying out of your business." Before she could respond, I hung up. No more pleas. No more guilt. No more saving people who never once thought to save me. Eviction day, 3 days later, I stood at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed, as the eviction crew rolled up to my parents' house. Their house for now. The movers wasted no time. Furniture, boxes, memories. Everything was being hauled out with clinical precision. Decades of living reduced to items in a truck. And then the front door slammed open. My father came storming out, face red with rage, eyes wild like a cornered animal. "You think this makes you strong?" he shouted, his voice shaking. "Destroying your own family?" I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just watched. "You told me to stay out," I said flatly. "I'm simply making sure you do the same." His fists clenched. His shoulders tensed. For a second, I thought he might lunge at me. He did, but I didn't move. "Get out of my sight," I said, my voice like ice. "And don't ever, ever seek me out again." He stopped, chest heaving, face twisted with fury and disbelief. But he said nothing. And for the first time in my life, I turned my back on him with no hesitation. No fear. No guilt. He had nothing left to take from me. I expected him to explode, to scream, to try and spin the narrative like he always did, to make himself the victim and me the villain. But instead, he just stood there, silent, watching the movers empty his life, piece by piece. My mother stood beside him, clinging to his arm, her face wet with tears. But he didn't even acknowledge her. His eyes were vacant, hollow, like the weight of it all had finally caved in. It was almost anticlimactic. As I reached the end of the walkway, I heard him mutter, barely above a whisper, "You've always hated us." I stopped, turned slightly. "No," I said, locking eyes with him one final time. "I just stopped caring for people who never once cared for me." And with that, I walked away from the house, from the pain, from them. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left behind. They were. The aftermath of freedom by nightfall, the house was mine. Officially, legally, irrevocably. The locks had already been changed. Their names were erased from the title. Their belongings were gone. So were they. For the first time ever, they were the ones left wandering without a roof over their heads. I stood in what used to be their living room. The same room where I'd once sat on the floor as a child, waiting for my father to come home, only for him to stumble in drunk or not at all. The same room where they ignored my pleas, brushed off my sacrifices, and treated my help as entitlement. And now it was mine. I waited for the guilt. I thought it might hit me, maybe in a delayed wave. But it didn't. Instead, I fell whole, because I hadn't just taken a house. I had reclaimed myself, but I wasn't done. Taking the house, that was just the surface. I wanted to make sure my father never bounced back. I wanted this to be the end of the cycle, not just a pause in it. So I went deeper. Turns out, his financial ruin was even worse than I realized. There were unpaid business loans from failed ventures, back taxes that had been quietly piling up, debts to old friends and forgotten lenders, people who had given up any hope of being repaid. But I had the money now, and I had the will. One by one, I found them, and I bought everything. Every dime he owed, every signature he ever scribbled on a loan form, every broken promise he made. It all became mine. By the time I was finished, my father didn't just owe money. He owed it to me. And unlike the collectors he'd lied to for years, I had no interest in giving him another chance. No interest in working something out. I issued one final demand. Pay the full amount, or declare bankruptcy. I already knew what he'd choose. Not because it was easier, but because it was the only option he had left. There was no one left to manipulate. No one to save him. No me. He was too proud to beg. Too full of himself to apologize. But bankruptcy? That he couldn't escape. The paperwork hit him like a blow to the chest. Within 48 hours, his name was etched into public bankruptcy records for everyone to see. A legal obituary of the life he had ruined. His credit gone, his reputation in shreds, his mask finally ripped off. He lost everything. And I made sure he knew exactly who pulled the final string. I sent him one message. Just 2 words. Now we're even. He didn't respond, but I saw the read receipt, and that was enough. Erasing the past once the dust settled, I turned my attention back to the house, not just as property, but as a symbol. It wasn't enough to legally own it. I needed to cleanse it, wipe away every trace of them. Step 1, strip it bare. Every piece of worn-out furniture was hauled away. The sagging couch, the dining table stained with arguments and silence, the old recliner where my father used to fall asleep with a beer in his hand, gone. The family photos came next. Frame by frame, I pulled them from the walls. 4 smiles, staged holidays, fake affection, all of it trashed. They weren't memories. They were monuments to a life I had been forced to hold together while they tore it apart. I didn't pause. I didn't keep a single thing. By the end of the week, the house was unrecognizable, empty, cold, and clean. For the first time, it wasn't theirs. It was just a structure. For walls, nothing more. Then I sold it. Not because I needed the money. I didn't. But because I wanted to make absolutely sure my father would never again cross its threshold. Not even for a glance through the window. And the moment the deal closed, when the papers were signed and the ink dried, my phone rang. My mother. I stared at the screen. I considered letting it ring. But curiosity, that old, bitter ghost, got the better of me. I answered. Lucas, she began. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. We need to talk. I leaned back in my chair, already bracing for the performance. About what? I asked dryly. It's your father, she whispered. He's not doing well. He's lost everything. You've made your point. Have I? I replied. Silence. You didn't care when I was drowning, I said, my voice steady, emotionless. You stood by and watched him bleed me dry. You kept quiet. You let him ruin me piece by piece. She didn't argue. She couldn't. But now that he's the one suffering, now it matters? It's not the same, she murmured. No, I said. It's not. Because this time, it's his problem, not mine. For the first time in her life, my mother had no response. No defense. No guilt to throw back at me. I ended the call, and I never picked up again. Weeks passed, and for the first time in my memory, I felt weightless. No more guilt-laced phone calls. No more desperate messages. No more being treated like I owed them a life just because they gave me one. For years, I had suffocated under the weight of their chaos. Now, they were the ones scrambling to breathe, and I was finally free. The unexpected message, I thought it was over. The house was sold. The debts were settled. The silence had become a companion instead of a curse. But one evening, as I scrolled through my phone in the quiet of my apartment, a message came in from a number I didn't recognize. Just one line. I need to see you. Please. I didn't need to check who it was. I knew. My first instinct was to delete it. But something inside me paused. Not out of compassion, but out of curiosity. I wanted to see him. I wanted to look into the eyes of the man who had spent years draining me dry and left me with nothing. So I typed a response. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., the diner on 5th. I arrived early the next day, coffee already cooling in front of me. When he finally walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. This wasn't the man I had grown up fearing, chasing, or trying to save. His clothes were wrinkled and mismatched. His hair looked unwashed. His shoulders, once square with false confidence, were slumped, as though the weight of everything he'd built on lies had finally collapsed onto his back. He sat down across from me, hands trembling as he stirred the sugar into his cup, like it was the only thing he could still control. Lucas, he said quietly, voice rough, almost hoarse. I kept my tone cold, unreadable. What do you want? He let out a shaky exhale, eyes flickering between me and the table. I need help. I tilted my head slightly, like I was trying to remember the definition of the word. Help, I echoed, amused. That's strange. I remember being told to stay out if I wasn't going to offer it. He winced, his face twisted, not in anger, but in something far more unfamiliar. Humiliation. I didn't mean, you meant exactly what you said. I cut in, my voice sharp. You always did. He looked away, shame crawling up his neck like heat. The silence between us was heavier than anything he could have said. I know I messed up, he muttered, but I'm still your father. I laughed, a low, bitter sound. No, you were never my father. You were just a man who used me until there was nothing left to take. And now that the tables have turned, you want to remind me of family? He didn't speak. His lips parted. His throat worked. But there were no more excuses left to give. Please, Lucas, he whispered. I have nowhere else to go. I leaned in, folding my hands in front of me. Neither did I said. And you didn't care. He looked stunned, like it had truly never occurred to him that I might become just as indifferent as he had always been. Why should I care now? I asked. He searched my face, desperate for something to cling to. His voice cracked as he said, because I'm your family. I stared at him. And you told me to stay out of my family if I wasn't willing to help. I replied with a smirk. So now, I stood, pulled a few bills from my wallet, and dropped them beside my half-finished coffee. You stay out of mine. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already seen everything I needed to see. The man who once walked like he owned the world, now hunched and hollow, begging for scraps in a cheap diner. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity, no remorse, just freedom. The final gift that night. I sat alone in the quiet glow of my apartment. No music, no distractions, just the dim screen of my phone in my hand. I half expected it to buzz again with a new message from him. My father never knew when to stop. Giving up had never been in his vocabulary until now. But this time, there was no message. Because for the first time in his life, he had run out of people to exploit. My mother was just as wrecked as he was. My sister? She had long since leaned on me to carry the family weight, and I wasn't holding it anymore. He had no one left. No money. No home. No liberty. And finally, he was sitting in the very same darkness he had once left me in. But when my phone finally did vibrate, it wasn't from him. Brett Phillips, my uncle's attorney. Mr. Everett, I'd like to follow up on your uncle's affairs. There's one last matter I'd prefer to discuss in person. Please call me at your convenience. My chest tightened. What else could there possibly be? I had signed every document, claimed every asset, used that inheritance to dismantle everything my father had ever taken from me. What could possibly remain? I called. Mr. Everett, Phillips greeted me, calm as always. Thank you for returning my call. I found something during a final review of your uncle's estate. It had been arranged separately years ago. A piece of property, not part of the initial portfolio. I frowned. I thought I already had everything. You do, he confirmed. Except for this. A pause. Then he said the words that froze me in place. It's your father's old auto shop. The one he started before things unraveled. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Your Uncle Francis purchased it years ago, discreetly. He kept the title in his own name. And now, by legal succession, it's yours. I sat in stunned silence, gripping the phone like it might vanish. The auto shop. The one my father poured years into. The one he let rot under his reckless spending and selfish pride. The only thing he'd ever built with his own two hands before he destroyed it. And now, it belonged to me. I almost laughed. In one final, brilliant move, Uncle Francis had given me the last word. The checkmate. The perfect, devastating closure. I didn't hesitate. Mr. Phillips, I said, a slow smirk forming, let's set up a visit. The next morning, I stood outside the rusted gates of the auto shop. The sign, faded, crooked, missing letters, still bore his name. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown. The paint peeled off the walls in flakes, and rust had claimed everything the rain had touched. It was perfect, a mirror of the man who once thought he could control everything, now reduced to silence and dust. I stepped inside. The scent of oil and steel still lingered in the air. The ghosts of engines, arguments, and broken promises lived in those walls. This was once his pride, his legacy. Now it was mine, but I had no intention of reviving it. I pulled out my phone and made one call. Within a week, the property was sold. Not to him, not to anyone who had ever shaken his hand, but to a corporate entity, a faceless developer who would level the building and raise something entirely new. Something he would never recognize. By the time he found out, it was too late. He called me, frantic, furious. You had no right, he screamed. I brought the phone to my ear, calm as ever. I had every right, I replied. And that was it. No anger, no venom, just truth. Because he had taught me this game, and now I had played it better. I hung up, and this time, it was final. The final reflection weeks passed. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt something I hadn't known I was capable of: peace. There was no more ringing phone at 3 a.m. No more urgent messages. No more desperate pleas for money. No more guilt. For the first time, I wasn't being made to feel like I owed them something, just for existing. For years, I had been the one buried under their mess. Their chaos. Their expectations. Their debts. Their never-ending demands. I had lived for them. And in doing so, I had nearly lost myself. But now I was finally standing firm. While they struggled, trying to piece their world back together, I was free. The weight had lifted. The chains were gone. And the silence? It was no longer suffocating. It was my silence. And yet, despite everything I had done to sever those ties, there was one final thing I needed to understand. One last thing that needed to click into place before I could walk away, fully free from the past. I had torn apart every thread that bound me to my father. I had reclaimed everything he had stolen from me. And now I needed to ask myself, why I let it go on for so long. The answer wasn't simple, nor did I expect it to be. Maybe it was because I never felt worthy of anything beyond their demands. Maybe it was because for so long I thought I had to save them, even when I was the one drowning. Maybe it was because I wanted to believe in a family that was never truly there for me. But the truth was this: they had never seen me, not the real me, the son who was always supposed to be enough, just as I was. I had spent so many years trying to fill a hole that couldn't be filled, and now I saw it for what it was: An endless cycle that I had allowed to keep me bound, thinking it was my responsibility to fix them. But it wasn't. I didn't owe them anything. Not a cent. Not a second more of my life. And in that moment, with the weight of everything I had done finally settling into place, I knew I had taken the last step. I had freed myself, not just from their debts, but from their hold on me. The phone buzzed again, breaking my thoughts. It wasn't from them. It never would be. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out into the city I now controlled. Not through the eyes of a man shackled to his past, but through the eyes of someone who had finally found the power to choose their own future. For the first time, I felt a deep sense of clarity, a sense of freedom. And this time, it wasn't just a promise I had made to myself. It was a promise I had finally kept. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.